All right, guys, welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. I'm your host, Neil D'Souza, and we've got another amazing guest for you today. He is a business coach and he helps people overcome leadership blocks that limit growth and profitability. Now, he specializes in coaching business owners to conquer their struggles with confidence, manage growth pains, and optimize their time management skills, among the many other challenges that we as business owners face. He's also got a special 12-week coaching program that maybe we can learn a little bit about today. And he is the owner and founder of the BlueShirt business coaching business. And on our show today, Kyle Gillette. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have you on here, and for the listeners, actually, I actually asked one of my friends who is a small business owner. I said, "All right, I've got a business coach coming on today," and I said, "What are some questions that if you could ask, that you would ask of him?" And so he gave me some of those. So I'm going to try to sprinkle some of those into our conversation today. But the biggest thing I've got to ask you, Kyle, I want to get a little bit of background on you. But before I get to that, I've got to ask you the biggest question, which is, what are those blocks? What are the biggest limiting beliefs that you see that block out growth and profitability?
Yeah, a lot of people are going to want to say imposter syndrome. They don't believe in themselves or what they're capable of. And I think that that's a part of the equation. But I think if you don't feel like an imposter, then you're not doing business right because you're not stretching yourself enough. So I don't think that's really the thing that's the real target for most people. I want my clients to feel like an imposter because if they don't, then they're not pushing themselves hard enough.
Okay.
I think a lot of times it can be these things associated with their history, maybe some money blocks as it relates to how they were raised. Maybe it's leadership things and how they can keep people accountable or help people to stay accountable, and they're afraid to have those difficult conversations with people. It's also energy management, these mindset blocks about, I got to get so much done, but I don't have time to do it. Actually, their issue isn't time. Their issue is energy management. And they're not putting their energy into the right things and the right people. So those would be the three that quickly come to mind that need to be worked on. And a vast majority of people have those to some degree or another. Some people have them so much so that it really does block any sort of progress for them as a leader or for the business. And others, it's just this little tweak that if that would happen, things would open up a little bit more.
Okay, sometimes just a little tweak. Okay, so these are the main ones: imposter syndrome. Most people come to you and they're telling you that the problem is imposter syndrome, which you help them reframe. But what you really see is the biggest blocks are the money blocks, maybe accountability, things around accountability and energy management.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So normally our thought process is, all right, if these things are there, what we need to do is block those out. Is that okay, I got a block. Let me block out whatever that is. Let me, I'm worried about money. Let me block that out. Is that the way to take these on?
Well, I think if you could look at it in three ways.
Okay.
You've got a block. You could either turn around and avoid it and try to go a different direction. You could go around it, which is different than just turning around. Yes. You can go over it or you could go through it. And each of those scenarios depends on the situation, but often I think it's best to go through it. When you go through it, then going through it is going into your mind and going, what is going on inside of me that I'm experiencing this money block? What is going on inside of me that I'm experiencing these issues with how I manage my time? Why do I always have 1,000 emails or 500 phone calls every month? What's going on here? And
Mhm.
if you go into the mindsets behind it, you go through it, you come out and that block should be very small or gone altogether. But if you try to
Mhm.
climb over it and just overcome it, that's not going to do the work, because that block's going to return. If you just turn around, obviously you're not doing anything with it. And if you avoid it, now you're probably creating another block and creating another rut in your mindsets. So the best with my clients is to go through it and deal with it directly.
Right. That's interesting. Because I'm sure that the feeling of going over it, okay, I'm just going to avoid this. I'm just going to go over top of it and not actually addressing it. Yes, we can understand that it's there, but you got past it, which is what we
Right.
really needed. I need to get past it. Never mind all the rest. I got past it.
Or at least we
And
think we did.
or we think so so how do we know when to go through it and when to just get past it? Because sometimes I feel like there may be blocks. As a business owner myself, there are times where I'm like, there is something there, and I don't have the time to go
Yeah.
dealing with that. I'm going to acknowledge that there's something there, and I'm just going to go do this, and we'll come back to that and figure out what that was afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's an intuition thing, as the coach to the person, but also more importantly, their own intuition of,
Mhm.
okay, this has come up multiple times in my life. This
Yes.
issue with, I'm afraid to confront this employee about their behaviors or their lack of performance in the workplace. I'm afraid to
Yes.
confront it, and I know I should do something about it. And this has happened multiple times, maybe in different contexts or in the same business but different people, and it keeps popping up. It's like, well, that's clearly a sign that this needs to be dealt with. So pattern, right? We are creatures of habit. And so if there's a pattern that keeps on happening and it irks you, or it's bothering you, or it's hindering growth, or it's hindering you and it's keeping you thinking about it, that should be addressed. And the sooner you can address it, like when it's just a small situation in your mind, that's the best, because the pathways in your brain aren't locked in so much. And so it's easier to undo those pathways and create the better ones, create the ones that you want to have, because you are the one that's determining them instead of the pathways creating themselves. And the more we can control where we put those paths, the better. And so those patterns reveal it
Yeah,
themselves.
I actually heard Brian Tracy said that bad habits are easy to form but hard to live with. Good habits are hard to form but easy to live with.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing in what you're sharing there is something like, hey, those things are there, but you're gonna have to go through them and deal with them, so to say, if you really want to create long-term success.
Yeah, and it's about your language that you say to
Mm,
yourself,
yeah.
how you speak to yourself about the situation. And the more you understand
Ooh.
your own language, the more you can reprogram that language to be a different
What,
language, which reprograms
what's
the brain.
what's the most common thing that you hear business owners telling themselves in that internal language?
Yeah, there's two that immediately come to mind. It's, I'm so
Yeah.
busy,
I'm
okay,
so busy.
and I don't have enough time, which are obviously directly related.
Yeah.
But if I always say to you, Neil, that I am so busy, what does my brain have to do? It has to prove that to be true, because the brain doesn't do negatives. So I go, I'm so busy, Neil. I'm always busy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, well, now my behavior is going to reflect that, because I'm not going to lie to myself, or at least I might lie to myself, but my brain has to follow through on it. So I keep saying that, and then I have to continue to live that out in my actions. And if
Mhm.
I say that my business is organized and my schedule is booked and things are dialed in, then I have to live that out. Or better said, I get to live that out.
Yeah.
If I'm busy,
Yeah.
if I'm crazy, I'm going to live that out instead. And that
Mhm.
language matters, and we can make subtle shifts in the language that makes big differences in a leader's life and the way that they run their business.
Yes, I absolutely. Uh, everyone knows, the listeners on my show know, we do not use the word busy. Busy is for losers. We kick that one out because and people that like the word busy, I always say this: if I had $1 million, Are you still busy?
Right.
I want to give you $1 million. Are you still busy? And all of a sudden you realize, oh, you're not that busy. It's just a matter of you may have a lot on your plate. You may
Hmm.
have a lot of things scheduled, but you're not busy. And we need to remove that, because when we have that thought process of busy, we not only try to keep out the what we think is the negative, but we also keep out the opportunities as well.
Yep. It's so true.
Okay, so as a business owner, I'm thinking, I don't know if I've got the time. I'm so busy. That obviously bleeds into, you've got the stress building up, and it starts bleeding into your family life as well.
Oh yeah.
That's probably the number one thing. Everyone, I'm working, but then when I'm with my family,
I'm
I
still
it's
working.
also bothering me. Yeah, I'm still working, and it's one of the things that business owners look at themselves. We all look at ourselves and go, I should just get a job, because if I just got a job, then when I'm done my day, I can stop thinking about whatever it is, and how peaceful that would be. Of course, we all
Right.
know that then we would go and worry about something else. So how do we create that? How do we divide that? How are we able to keep the thinking around work at that point in time, and when we're with family, be able to separate and actually be with family?
Yeah. You have to ask better questions, in my
Ooh,
opinion. So
okay.
if I'm asking myself questions about my business, about the people that I'm serving, about all the context of my business, that are more open and deeper questions that make my unconscious mind work, that's way healthier. That's a way better approach, it because then instead of my conscious mind chewing on the things that make me anxious and worried about the business and what's going on with my P&L, what's going on with this client, what's going on with this situation, what's the marketing deal, oh my gosh, my social media is not growing like I want it to. Instead I go, what would be the best thing I can do to grow my social media? And let my unconscious mind play with that question, and it's going to come up with some phenomenal insight for me. But my conscious mind, which is the mind I bring to my home, and that's the one that keeps me awake at night if I'm thinking about something, that one is off as it relates to work, when I ask those powerful questions of myself. And that's why coaches can be so helpful, because they are able to ask those powerful questions, and
Yes.
you turn off the conscious part of thinking about your business, and you let the back, quote unquote, the back of your mind think about things instead.
Oh my goodness, you hit something right there, because I was literally thinking to myself, look, I'm stressed right now. I've got a lot of things on my plate right now, and in that moment, you're you're trying to think, what question could I ask myself? And I think you just hit it. Part of the benefit of having a business coach, having a mentor in this area for your business, is that they're going to be able to reframe. They're going to be able to give you those questions to reframe how you're thinking. Is that
And
right?
yeah, 100%. And you can do it yourself as you learn more and more about who you are.
Yeah.
Blue is an acronym, and the B stands for be a self-aware leader. And so the
Okay.
more you become a self-aware leader, the easier it is to go, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. Now, what's the question I can ask myself? And
Mm.
then that stress, that skill of stress, that skill of getting anxious about things, instead of it being a liability, becomes an asset for you. And then it's actually fun to chew on the question. And you can often, it's easier to let it go and let it just kind of simmer when you ask yourself those good questions and see the stress that you're experiencing in your business as an asset to you, because you're reframing it and giving it a better angle to come from, right? So
Mhm.
looking at your situation from work or your business, instead of in a 2 dimension, you look at it from 3 dimensions. So you kind of separate yourself out from it and look at it from a 3rd dimension or fourth or whatever you want to say. And that allows you to let go of it and let it take its own shape and look at what's going on there from a much clearer perspective than trying to carry it with you all the time.
Yeah, but Kyle, I don't think you get what's going on over here with me. I've got these bills I got to pay. I've got staff that I've got to pay. I got to get this deal done or people are getting sued. I really appreciate what you're saying, but right now that sounds like a bunch of hokey while I'm trying to figure this out.
Yeah, well, the primary word in that objection is I.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the problem with business owners is they rely on themselves too much and controlling themselves too much, or
Yes.
controlling the situation, excuse me, too much. So what's the solution? It's the same solution as before. Ask better questions. So instead of you just asking yourself questions, you're asking other people better questions to help you resolve these situations. Whether you're a solopreneur or have 100 people in your business, if you ask better questions, you get better solutions, and you don't have to rely on I so much. And
Yes.
this is the de-stressing factor, the re-energizing factor, and it allows you to have much more clarity in the way that you approach people and the things in your business.
Ooh. Sorry, I'm writing this down. I think you just gave me an answer to to something for myself. Woo!
Awesome.
Yeehaw! Love it. Um, Literally, you just hit me with the and this is the part of it, guys. If you're listening, this is the part of it of having mentors, having business coaches is they will help open up something in an area that you've got that type of block. I've talked to who knows how many people about this very same thing, and all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, I'm trying to figure this out. Why the heck am I trying to figure this out? I just wrote down who can help me to solve that.
Yep.
Take that off. Let someone else go solve that issue that's better empowered to be able to do that. And it's funny, the headache's already starting to go. Thank you.
Sweet.
See, guys, right here, right on the show live, Kyle is exercising my demons right here
Yeah.
in this moment. So I
So
love it. Thank
let
you.
me give you a very practical question, because
Yeah,
people are like, okay, well, what questions do I ask?
come on.
This one is easy. I'll give you two actually, but this
Yeah.
one is so simple, and it's 4 words. Someone
Okay.
comes to you and they've got a problem, right? Employees consistently bring their employers, their supervisors, the business owner problems. And what does the
Yes.
business owner do? They go, bam, I'm Superman. I got responses. I got answers.
Dun 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 dun.
Exactly.
Dun.
They're like,
Yes.
look at me, their arms up in the air. I got
Yeah.
answers for it.
Yeah.
They give the 3 different possibilities, et cetera, et cetera. Shut
Yes.
up. Don't do that. Instead, say, what do you think? 4 words. What do you think? Bill, Joe, Susan, whatever, brings you a problem. And instead of in your mind going, okay, how can I solve this? What can I do to be the hero? And I know people don't think be the hero, but we've got it embedded in us that as an entrepreneur, we need to have all the answers. Instead, just say, well, what do you think? And ask it in a tone that's super curious, appreciative, not condescending or infantilizing, but just, what do you think, Joe, about this? What would you do? And then shut the heck up and wait for them to respond. And if it takes 30 seconds for them because they're taken aback by, oh my gosh, you actually care about my opinion, give them that space to think. And if they say, I don't know, ask the question again. And if they still say, I don't know, ask them to come back to you in a couple minutes or whatever with some solutions. But the tone is important there. Because if you say it in a way that's disparaging or sounds insulting, like, well, why don't you have this figured out? Then it's not going to have its same effect. But again, what do you think? That's it. And most people have never been asked that question in a workplace. They're just automatons, or at least that's how their employers treat them at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is really something powerful about allowing someone, an employee, to be able to go think it through and
Yeah.
figure it out, because they get that feeling of being dun dun dun, dun. They get to feel like Superman,
Yep.
Superwoman, and come up with that response, come up with that answer, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, whatever. They've started working on that ability to solve problems.
Yeah, one of the things that I tell my clients that get real frustrated with their employees. So obviously I ask them, what questions you ask your employees, and they'll, what do you mean? What do you mean? And that's the obvious, okay, I know what's going on here, and let's talk about asking questions. But what we want for our employees is what we want for ourselves. And that is, when they go to bed at night, if they're thinking about you and the business in a way that's keeping them up at night, that's not good. That's a problem. You're not doing a good job as a leader. But if they're going to bed at night and they're not really thinking much about the business, but they wake up in the morning with a brilliant solution to the business, now you're really leading well, because the questions that you've asked them has tapped into their unconscious mind. That supercomputer that all of us have, you're asking questions and having them do things that require more than just the simple thinking. And when they come to you with this really insightful solution and they're full of energy about it and they're excited, and like, this thought came to me, it came out of nowhere, I had this idea. That's beautiful. Now you're truly serving your employee. They're really serving you. And the fruit of that is they're owning the business with you, because we always want other owners in our business, right? Nobody owns the business like I do. That's what all business owners say. And it's true. I agree. But when you get them to think, now they're starting to own it with you. And I have a client that's a landscape and handyman business owner, and his landscaping department head, I'm coaching him as well, and he owns the business. But it's because my client allows him to think and allows him to solve and basically run that division like it's his own business. And so now his attitude, his being the department chair leader, his attitude is, this is mine. I own this, and I need to solve the problems. I need to be coming up with the solutions. So that's the power of helping other people think for themselves. And we're not trained to do that in school, in any level at school. So it's ingrained the opposite way in us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You're taught that you have to come up with the solution by yourself. Yep. Don't ask anybody else, because that's cheating. Right.
Yep. It's so true.
And then of course we get into business, and you realize virtually every answer you're going to get that's of value is going to come through collaboration and working with other people. And you're going to, for all the smartest people in the world, they all end up hitting a ceiling at some point with themselves, if they're the ones that are, whatever level that ceiling is. You guys are listening, you guys know what we're talking about. You have tried to do it by yourself, and you've gotten to a point and you got stuck there, and so now you're like, what do I do now? And then some people of course just stay there, and some people actually look for what's that answer, what's that next question, who can help me with the next part.
Can I talk on that for a moment?
Yeah, hit us.
So 2 weeks ago, I was thinking about, what has made my business successful? What has made it profitable? Yeah. And I was looking at my expenses. Where have I spent money? How have I spent money in my business to help it grow? Because you got to spend money to earn money, right? It's just part of the picture. Mm-hmm. And I noticed a trend. Every time I spent money on myself, on development of myself, which is a vast majority of the time through other people, right? A coach, a mentor, networking opportunities, a course, etc. That gave me a great return. I'm like, okay, what's the return? And so I track a lot of stats in my business, a ton of stats. Like you ask me numbers about my business, and I can give you to the 10th percentage of what's going on there, because that's vitally important. And we can talk about that at another point. But this is the same thing. And I went, okay, so I've spent X thousands of dollars on my investment, 18,500 in the last 5 years, right? So for some people, that's a ton. For others, that's not very much. It doesn't matter. The point is that I've spent money on my own self-development as it relates to coaching and other things.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's been my return? Well, I know my marketing numbers, and I know that 80% of how I get my clients is through my direct marketing, people renewing with me, like old clients that come back, or referrals. That's all me. That's not marketing online. That's not things. That's not ads. It's things that I'm doing as I've developed myself, that people appreciate because I'm doing good coaching with them, or they're referring because they got good coaching from me, right? Yeah. So I know that 80% of my income comes from that. My return on investment has been 15.2%. Right. So for every dollar I spend on myself to develop myself through coaching and these other avenues, I get $15.20 back. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for everybody else? When you bring other people in, like you're talking about, you collaborate with them, you mastermind with people, you network with people, the return on your investment is at least going to be a 2x. I could guarantee that. In my case, it's a 15.2x. And that is a beautiful thing. That's a wonderful thing. And so what am I doing? Well, I'm going to sign up for a class in May that's about listening. I've got a class in June that I'm doing, and so on and so forth for the rest of the year, because I know it gives me a return better than anything else I've ever done in my business.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, if you just saw me turn over to my phone, I was actually pulling out the calculator, and I just thought, what is the return on some? Because I'm doing courses normally, personal development, pretty much on a yearly basis,
yeah,
taking something to about thinking differently, about leadership, all of these types of things. And I just quickly looked over, and I think the number was astronomical. So the return was astronomical. I thought that's an interesting metric. If I
yeah,
look at how much I spent and how much growth did I have that year,
yep.
And some might say, well, was it the course that did it, or was it something else? And
Oh yeah, sure. I agree. But even if I divided that number by 5, it's still a 3x return, which is
yes,
100% worth it.
yeah,
Anybody
yeah,
would take that right now in the stock market. That's
yeah.
for sure.
Well, it's really interesting, because if it really does make, like you said earlier on, if it makes that one tweak, it gives you the power to make that one tweak. That one tweak is easily a 3x or a 5x,
Oh yeah.
right? And we miss it because the the gratification doesn't come till later on. You don't see that till after you've made the investment. And I think that's the interesting thing, obviously being an investor myself, is to help people understand that you make the investment now and the payoff comes afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. The layers of what I'm doing with people is, so you get to that self-awareness part, right? Be a self-aware leader.
Yeah.
Then the L in the acronym is lead with accountability.
Yeah.
So now my mindsets are dialed. Right? I got my mindsets figured out. Not perfect, of course, we're always growing, but they're way better. So then what? Now you need accountability to stick with it, right? To lead your life, lead other people with accountability. To what? Well, to the goals that you want to achieve, to the habits that you want to be successful in. And how do you know you're doing a good job at that? There's a phrase that I learned when I worked at a men's mentoring program, and I was real frustrated with the president of the program because I had all these brilliant ideas and I would share them with him, and he'd be like, "Okay, Kyle," and then he wouldn't do anything. I'm like, "What the heck, Jack? Why aren't you doing anything?" So I asked the director at the time,
Yeah, what the heck, Jack? Come
"Yeah,
on.
what's up?" And Christian, the director, said, "Jack needs facts and figures," and he said to me, "Facts and figures set you free." And that phrase just chunked into my brain in a really powerful way. So you get your self-awareness and you're better with your mindsets, and you understand what's going on within you, the stress, the energy management, the time management, all these things we've been talking about. Then you create these new habits and patterns within whatever way you need to, but you track it very specifically, right? So we know most people know what their profit margin is. Most people know what their income is in their business, but most people don't know exactly how they got that income, exactly how they got that profit margin, the percentages, the data behind that. But if you have that data, now you can hold your business, the people in your business, and yourself accountable to that process of achieving those things. But you got to clear out the mindsets before you can care about the data. Because if the mindsets aren't clear, you're too wrapped up in the stress and everything. So you clear that out, then you go to the data, and those facts and figures set you free to think clearly and to make way better decisions about how to run your life, your leadership, and your business, and typically in that order.
Okay, I want to ask for a little clarification around this
Sure.
because I like the direction that you're going, and I actually would say I agree with you with regards to the facts and figures setting you free, because I know that when you can actually look at them and see what they are, then your brain doesn't have to imagine these sorts of things.
Correct.
But here's my question, because I remember two friends of mine, they were partners and they were working on their business, and they had all sorts of metrics. They had numbers on this and that, and I just kind of did a cross section of the business. I looked at it and I said, okay, here's 80% of your income is over here in this area right here, and then meanwhile you're divided all over the place. And then when we started looking at the numbers, I said, guys, I think you're doing way too much tracking of your numbers, and I think you need to go make some more money. Like it,
Yeah.
I was like, you guys are arguing about dollars and cents. You need to just go bring more money into the door. And what we're looking at is, here's where your money comes from. Go find some more business in that area, and then we can get to the tracking of all of that stuff. Is there a line where you're like,
Right.
okay, we'll get to that, or should we be looking to implement all these systems, tracking this stuff from the get-go?
Yeah. So there's a phrase, there's a saying that's if you torture the data enough, it'll give you what you want. Right. So
Okay.
if you're not careful, you can get so much data that you stare at it and you torture it so that you go, okay, that's what I want
Okay.
to get out of it. So
Yes.
how do you combat that? You combat that by only focusing on a couple things at one time. Right.
Okay.
So I run my business in 12-week increments, with the
Yeah.
13th week, the end of the quarter being the kind of the review time. And this is credit to 12-week year. It's a great book. So, and also the 4 Disciplines of Execution, 2 really good books that touch on basically the same thing. But you run it in 12-week increments with a maximum of 2 goals per quarter. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
wait a second. I got all kinds of stuff I got to get done in my business. What are you talking about? I have all kinds of goals. Yes, you do. But take the 80% of your business. That's the stuff that just gets done, right? 80% of what happens in our business, we can do with our eyes closed, ears plugged. It's just stuff that happens that you don't have to think too much about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whirlwind, according to 4 Disciplines of Execution. The whirlwind gets done. The 20% is the 2 goals, the 1 or 2 goals that you really need to dial into and focus on.
Mm-hmm.
What does that 20% represent? Like, what do you mean by 20%, Kyle? Well, time. How many hours do you work in a given week, Neil?
Oh, me. My goal is 18 hours a week, but right now it's about let's call it 60.
Okay. All right. So 60. Most people, what's the stat? Oh, the stat's there. I think it's 13%. So everybody makes up stats on the off the cuff, but it's a pretty high percentage of business owners, a scary percent, that work 50 plus. It's 49%. That number I know is accurate.
Yeah, this year's a little difficult for me because I basically took the first 3 months of the year off. We had some family stuff going on. I have the benefit of being able to do that, but now I'm working 60 hours a week or more, so
right, to make up for it. So let's
just kind of getting back into it, and business is busy.
Yeah,
business
right.
is,
But it's not.
a
No,
lot. It's not.
It's
not. There's a lot coming at me, and
awesome. So let's say the average is 50 hours, right? It's pretty close to the average. So then 20% of 50 is 10 hours, right? So if you spend 10 hours of your work week focused on those 2 top priorities, now you're going to look at the data from the right angle. Mm-hmm. Because the other 80% is just taking care of itself. You have to do the work, I get it, but you're not putting your best energy and best thinking towards it. So in a given week, whatever those 2 primary goals are for that quarter, 10 hours of your time should go to those 2 goals. That's an effective way to run your business. That's an effective way to not get too focused in the minutia, but still let facts and figures set you free. and still allowed the creativity of our minds to come up with answers to these really big goals that we're focusing on the quarter. And then when that quarter is over, you reset, and maybe you continue on the goal or you create new ones.
Yes.
And you just keep moving forward every
Yes.
quarter like that.
Yeah. I actually think that that's a great benefit, because for me, it's important to always have that reset, to be able to go through reset, because otherwise it's like an engine that's running all the time. And, although you can do it, if you need to do it for a period of time, it's going to end up burning out. Right. And so you have to be able to dial it back and have that time of rest. And I think sometimes people wonder if they're going to crack under stress. And I always love the analogy of like a vehicle. We've got our not the speedometer, the RPMs.
Yeah.
It's got the red, and literally the engine can go into the red and not blow up. But
Right.
you don't want to live your life
Right.
in that space.
Yeah.
Right. So there's definitely a high need for being able to step back. And so you're saying you like to do it in that 12 weeks with the 13-week review.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is all associated with accountability, right? Because I could tell you, if we've got time, I could tell you about something that I call the accountability PASS, PASS.
Okay.
It's an acronym. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So
you want to go into it right now?
Yeah, I'll dive in. So
Okay.
You mentioned the vehicle, and part of the acronym, part of the metaphor of it is a vehicle. So PASS stands for passive, active, structures, and self. And I'm going to go kind of fast here because sometimes
hit it.
I can do this in 2 hours, or I can do this in 2 minutes. So
okay, let's hit it.
So passive is telling your story. So Neil, you have these goals in your business, and the closer you can get to the real deep why, the better. That's the real story behind why you're doing what you do, why you want to achieve this specific goal.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get that clear, then your brain goes, oh, I get it. I have real clarity about what I'm trying to do and what I need to do, what it could look like and what it could sound like and what it would feel like. And then your unconscious mind goes to work to fix that gap between what is and what you've created in your mind that's going to be. Okay, that's great. So that's the story you tell your mind. But then also you tell people that story, right? So I recently wrote a book, and I told 40 people that I was going to write a book before I even started writing. And then
book alert. Okay.
What happened?
Yeah.
Some of those people, not all, some of those people said, hey, what's going on with that book you talked about? How far are you into the book? What's it about? That creates accountability for me. It's this passive accountability. They're riding shotgun in my truck, and they're going, hey, your check engine light is on. I thought you're going to write this book, but it looks like things are a little out of whack. What are you going to do about it? So then I take it to the shop, get it fixed, or I do the work I need to do, get it fixed, and I keep moving forward on the book. Yeah. The next step, that's your passive accountability, because you're not making them check in. They're just doing it themselves. And you're not making your brain think about it. It's just doing it itself too, because you've basically asked it a question. How do I create this new reality? How do I create this book? And then it goes to work on it. Active accountability is let's say out of the 40 people that you reach out to, 3 people start to engage with you on the goal that you want to achieve, because they're genuinely interested in the story that you told. And I use the word story intentionally, because it needs to be a story, compelling for yourself and other people. Then you ask Joe, hey, Joe, I noticed that you've been asking me about my book. I really appreciate that. Can we meet weekly to talk about what's going on with you and what you would like to achieve? And I could share what's going on with me. Joe says yes. It's almost inevitable. Like, people want that so bad. They don't know it, but they want it so bad. So now you have your active accountability, where someone is checking in with you on what you're doing, and you're checking in with them. So it's reciprocal. And it's really encouraging, because you're watching them move forward and they watch you move forward, and it just perpetuates things. Then you get structures. This is the plan part, right? If anything's going to be achieved, you need to have a plan. And the plan changes, but you need to have a semblance of a plan. So this takes a long time. So the brief version is to-do lists and counters. To-do list is the things that you need to get done as it relates to the goal. And that can be on paper or digital. I highly recommend digital, so that you don't have to remember it. It's just there for you, and you don't have to
Yeah.
write it down 100 times. Calendar is the people part. Almost everything on my calendar is associated with people and meeting with people and interacting with people. You put those two together, and that's your plan to achieve this goal. Lastly is the self. I have to keep myself accountable. Joe's sitting shotgun now with me. We've committed to that. And he points out the check engine light's on, but he can't take over my truck. He can't push me out the door and say, I'm going to drive your truck to the shop, or I'm going to make you go in your garage and work on it. He can't do that, but he can point it out, and then I need to do something about it. And self-accountability is about finding that point of no return that says, I've decided to do this, but now I'm truly committed. So the example is, Neil, have you ever jumped out of an airplane or skydived or ziplined before?
Yes.
Which one of those?
I've done all of those.
Oh, okay. So let's do the skydiving one, because that one's the most obvious here. When you decide you're going to skydive and you're in the plane and you're almost at jumping altitude, you still could decommit, right? You could still undecide and be like, hey, I can't do it. I'm terrified. Or you throw up or whatever. And you're like, I'm just not going to do this. But then once you get to the door and the wind's hitting you in the face, you got your goggles on, and the guide is, you're strapped in, the light turns on, and you lose gravity, you're committed. You cannot crawl back into that airplane. It's over. You are committed. This is what we need to do to stay accountable to these goals that we set for ourselves, those 20% goals, right? Those goals that we put our best effort and energy into. We need to find a way to commit so much so that there's just no point of return, right? For example, last year in April, my wife worked as a nurse, and she 6 figures, doing well, supported the family. I'm running my business. We had a lot of income happening, 2 incomes, but I didn't want her to have to work anymore, and she didn't want to have to work anymore. And so she quit her job. She quit being a nurse. There goes 6 figures. That is a point of no return. We lost gravity. We weren't crawling back into that plane. It's over. Now we're committed. So whatever that is for the individual in the particular situation, figure that out. And that's the core of the accountability. The other 3 pieces, the passive, active, and structures, feed into that. But ultimately, it's up to the individual to make that commitment.
There's something there about jumping out of the plane, right? Identifying what that really is, that point of no return.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you this other question, because I want to make sure that I address it from a friend who we were talking about. He was talking about the stress. He was talking about the looking himself in the mirror and having that feeling of, I want to get the most out of life. I want to make sure I'm doing the most. And at the same time, simultaneously feeling like, am I doing too much? Do I need to stop? Do I need to quit? Do I need to pull back? And that dichotomy, right? Of how you can on one side be so ready to jump out of the plane, and on the other side, think, okay, no, maybe that's not what I should do. And you kind of touched on it right there in that moment of when you're standing at the doorway of the plane.
Yep. And you don't always want to jump, and you shouldn't always jump either, right? There are these times when it's like, no, I really should not jump. And it's just not right now. It's not a permanent thing. It might not be right now that we need to lean in so heavily or go so hard. American culture and maybe Canadian culture too just pushes so freaking hard. You always got to be doing, going, growing. It's like, not necessarily. Maybe sometimes we need just to be reflecting and taking it in and learning and slowing down. I told you before the interview started that I met with someone at 6:30 this morning. Well, he's a mentor of mine. And his thing that he's heard repeatedly in his life over the last 6 weeks, I think it was, is he needs to breathe, literally breathe, just take a breath. And people really struggle to literally breathe, to take those deep breaths, slow themselves down, slow their roll, as people say, and think about what they're about to do, or think about what they would like to do. So when someone is facing that overwhelm of indecision, to me, we need to breathe. We need to take a breath and slow down and see what our bodies and our minds, and if you have a faith, what God says to you. And then you can make a much more sober decision. Because if we're stressed and anxious and worried, we're not sober. And I mean that word in by what it means. You're basically drunk, right? Because what does tiredness do to us? When someone's really tired driving on the road, they drive like they're drunk. It's the same impact, that tiredness. So think about how stress, anxiety, worry, and overdoing it and not managing your energy well makes you very exhausted. Now we're drunk and we're not going to make good decisions. We're drunk on stress. We're drunk on anxiety. We're drunk on doing, and now we don't make good decisions. So whatever decision this friend of yours needs to make, he needs to become sober first. And sometimes that sobriety comes with just a few breaths. Sometimes that sobriety comes over weeks because there's so much toxins that have built up, quite literally and metaphorically speaking, and they need to be dumped out. So the breath consistently matters, yes, but sometimes you also need to bounce the ideas off of other people and let it come out. So take the breath, share it with other people, and then the third piece to answer this question would be journal. Get out that journal. And if you're not a writer, it doesn't matter. Nobody else needs to see it, but get out that journal, dump the thoughts on paper, and let them go. Yes. Every time I journal, it's me putting the thoughts on paper and saying, it's digital paper, but put it on paper and saying, these are not mine anymore. I'm letting go and trusting that there's going to be an answer that comes to me. And if it's really deep, the concern is then it may take some time. But to me, those are three ways, not the ways, but three ways to help address a situation like you brought up.
Yeah. Well, I've got it's funny. I actually have a whiteboard here that when I find that there's too much going on up here, I literally pull out the whiteboard and I just realized that I guess I'm doing a form of journaling. To me, it was just sort of artwork. I would get out and I would literally write down everything that's going on in my head. I would put it on the whiteboard. All the thoughts, the negative language, everything, put it all onto the board, dump it all out of my brain. And I just realized, I guess I was journaling.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that to me, I liked that visual aspect of putting it on a whiteboard. Oh man, that's so interesting. I've been journaling for years.
Oh yeah, you have. It's awesome. There's a story.
I just can't go back and read them though.
Right, and that's why I do it digitally, because I can search it. Right, and if I'm dealing with something, I could search that term and then look at the journal that I dealt with it 2 years ago, 1 year ago, whatever. There's a story that I remember reading, and I don't know what book it's in, but there's this executive that works at this big firm, and he's stressed about life. He's stressed about work, and he walks out of the office and walks out onto the city street, and there's cars everywhere. There's people walking everywhere. And then there's a light post just up ahead. So he walks up to the light post and he looks at the light post and he spends 5 minutes talking to the light post, just telling him all his issues and struggles and situations with his business and his life and frustrations. And then he smiles and walks away, and he gets in his car and he goes home and he's fine. The point about this is we all need that. We all need to let it go. And sometimes that light post may just be a journal. Sometimes that light post might be someone else. And sometimes it actually might be a coach that will help you through it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But we need that light post, and the light post metaphor is clear too, because it shines light on what's going on. Right. So find that light post in your life, dump it out to them. And that might be the mirror where you talk to yourself and let your own light shine on your situation. Not to be too corny here, but really.
No.
And that opens up things.
You literally just made me think of a scripture where in the Bible where it talks about bring all things into the light that they may be seen for what they're worth. And I love that, because that's really part of what it is. You put it out, take it out of the head where it's dark and murky and mysterious, put it on a whiteboard, put it in a journal, write it down, put it digitally, and then actually be able to look at it and evaluate it. And if you're going to be a good business owner, you're going to have to be able to evaluate all sorts of things, including your own thoughts that are worrying about the wife, worrying about the kids, worrying about the bills. That's just the reality of being a human being and the multivariate nature. And so if people are beating themselves up about that, that's part of humanity.
Yeah.
Right. Instead, what I'm loving is you're giving some real concrete strategies for how to be able to look at those stressors and be able to identify what can be done and what you can just leave alone and allow it to be there and move forward.
Yeah, because ultimately the point of this whole podcast in my mind, in terms of what we've been talking about, is giving you and me and the listeners opportunity to think.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves space to think, and that's an energy management concern.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the energy to give ourselves space to think, then we're not going to perform at the level that we need to.
Absolutely.
So create that space to think. Sometimes that space is going to be in your car with the music off. Sometimes it's when you're taking a leak, because that's when the ideas come to us all the time, right? Sometimes it's in the shower. Sometimes it's when you're laying in bed. But give yourself time to think. And objections. I don't have time to do that. That's not true. I have clients that run a carpet cleaning business, and they are the income earners, period. If they're not working, they're not making money, which is a rough way to run a business, but they're making it, it's working, they're profitable in a good way, etc. But they need time to think too. So how in the world, when you're running a blue collar business like that, when it's dependent on you to earn the income, how do you create that space? And I said to them, what do you do between jobs? And so they described what they did. And I said, what if you spent 5 minutes, just sit in your truck, literally their truck, for 5 minutes and be quiet and take a break? In normal businesses that aren't run by ourselves, you're required to take 15-minute breaks every 4 hours, right? That's how it works, at least in the US.
Yeah.
But when we run our own businesses, we don't do that. We don't honor ourselves by taking a break. So I encourage them to take a 5-minute break between projects, and you have an extra 5 freaking minutes, man. You'll make up for that time by having your brain be in a better space. So find those windows. And if you don't think you even have 5 minutes, give it 30 seconds. Close your eyes, breathe 30 seconds. This is the stuff that seems a little woo-woo, but it's what we need to do.
Yeah. It's like a 13-week review in 30 seconds. Take that moment, just breathe. If right now you're listening and you're feeling stressed, you're feeling all of these things, take a moment, take 5 minutes and just carve it out of your day. If you can't find 5 minutes to carve out of your day, you've got too much junk on your plate.
It's 100%.
You're doing it wrong.
I'm
going to say it now. You're doing it wrong.
Yep. So
you can't do that. So tell me about the book, because you started to mention it, but then you didn't tell us what the name of the book is and what you talk about in the book.
Yeah. So the book, it's being renamed because of some complicated things that are happening, but it's going to be renamed. And the acronym within it is BLUE. And I've hinted at 2 of the letters. B stands for Be a Self-Aware Leader.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about that. The L is Lead with Accountability. And primarily in the book, I focus on self-accountability. There's a little bit on others. That's another workshop and topic that I work with my clients on, but primarily the self. Then use a growth mindset. Yeah. Right. And then E is empower others. So the way it works is there's 20 mindsets and 20 habits that I built into the book related to each of those different letters. So each letter has 5 mindsets and 5 habits. And those are the mindsets and habits of a self-aware leader or an accountable leader or a growing leader, right? And if you deploy some of those, you don't have to do all, but if you deploy some of those into your leadership, you become a blue shirt leader, right? You become that level of leader. And I wrote it with the intention of giving people this, empowering people to go, I can shift my mindsets. I can shift my habits to become the leader I'm meant to be. And
Yeah.
so you take on some of the mindsets and some of the habits. And if you make it a pattern in your life, then that shifts your life forever. And it shifts your
Yeah.
business forever. So a couple of them that we've talked about already is the pass. That's a set of habits. We also talked about journaling or writing. That's another one of them. We talked about being curious, which is asking questions. So that's a mindset. So those are some of the pieces that are in the book that I describe in more detail.
Yeah.
But this is something that's come out of a lot of study, a lot of work, a lot of experience,
Yeah.
and it's a very practical book, much like the interview has been.
Well, I mean, your background, you come from a farming family,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
And so, you know, that's about as blue collar as you can get. Do you find that a lot of what you're able to teach has come through lessons learned on the farm? Is that because you actually, let me just go into this quickly here, is you actually studied physical therapy,
Yeah.
and then switched it up,
Yeah.
and you've gotten into a number of things, but you've really found your stride in business coaching. How did that occur?
Yeah.
And is there some synchronicity between business coaching and coming from a farming family?
Yeah. So the medium version is farming. Farming is something that my dad still does, and I think ultimately it's in the blood of my family for generations now.
Yeah.
For me, my heart is much more associated with people, and farming is people too, of course, but it's more land. And so I took the ethics of how my dad and mom live and how my dad ran his business and is running his business, and put that into my business, right? Because when I say blue shirt, what I'm really talking about is that blue collar mentality. Now, not every client of mine is a blue collar business owner, but they have that blue collar mentality, which is, Neil, I shake your hand and I say, hey, we're going to do this project and it'll be done in 3 weeks. That's going to freaking happen, because the handshake is the bond. The word is the bond, right? Blue collar business owners and blue collar people have high levels of integrity. Not that white collar people don't. I'm not saying that. But there's this grind, there's this grit that's associated with blue collar that I really love in the people that I work with, regardless of what the context of their work is, right? So that comes into my business and into how I was raised. Secondly, when I graduated college, I was pursuing a personal training and I was pursuing physical therapy, and I realized that those weren't the path for me, especially not physical therapy. It just, for whatever reason, it wasn't the path for me. And I got introduced to a men's mentoring program. And they said, hey, you want to live in this men's mentoring program where you help these guys that are 18 to 25 that are lost and stuck in life? And they have, some of them had drug and alcohol histories. And I'm like, well, I'm really unqualified for that, but I need a job and a place to live. So yes, but it was still my heart. Like I really wanted to help those guys. And I felt like I could help them. So I ended up being in that program for 9 years. I lived in it for about a year and then ran the program for 4 years and ran a pet resort within it to support the program for 3 years, I think it was. And during that time, there's a guy named Jack, which I brought up briefly earlier, that's the president of the program. He still is. He ran 30 businesses over the course of his career, retired in his early 50s as a millionaire, and has never had a job since. All he's done since is run this program, never taken a paycheck to run it. What he did for me was every Tuesday at 11 or 11:30 a.m., he would mentor me for an hour and a half at lunch. We'd talk about life. We talk about business. We talk about spiritual things, anything and everything we talk about. And he dumped into my life his wisdom and insight. My dad did that from 0 to 18. He did that from 22 to about 32. So I have so much of that dumped into me, and their hearts, my dad's heart and his heart, are so much for people. And they have so much wisdom beyond their years, even though they're older, that I'm like, man, this is beautiful. I can use this for other people. And I tried to do life coaching first, but it wasn't a fit because I'm too driven, I think, for the pace in which life coaching works. but the business side works because of that. So I combine the two with the mindset side, which is the people, and the business side, which is the practical and the grind, the dirt, let's call it.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
all of it comes together like that.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful on so many levels to be able to go through and have that uncertainty, and something's not right, something's just not working for me in school here, and being able to transition and, quite frankly, make a decision that, hey, I don't have any money, I need to make some money.
Yeah.
Hey, look, that's a great motivator,
It was.
sometimes you're running to something, sometimes you're running from something.
Yep. Yep.
And in that process you get to ask yourself more questions of, what do I want? And so I think it's important, because oftentimes people, especially when you're younger, you try to sit down and think, oh, what do I want? Well, you got to go do something and work it out a little bit.
Right.
Find some things that you may not like, and it'll help you in that direction. Whereas if you sit down in one spot, I guarantee you're not going to get to wherever it is you want to go.
No.
Right.
It's got to be
so. And it's beautiful to think that Jack poured himself into you.
Yeah.
At that time, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us, with the listeners, your journey, what some strategies are that they can add to their life. If people want to get a hold of you, we'll put these into the show notes. But how do people, if they want to talk some more, if they want to look at your business program, if they want to do some sort of assessment, how do they do that? How do they get in contact with you?
Yeah, two key ways. Go to BlueShirtCoaching.com. That's my website. There's a way to connect with me. The way I do it is I offer an hour-long discovery call with someone, an hour-long coaching session. It's it's not a sales pitch, it's a coaching session, because I want people to know what I do, to make sure there's a clear fit, and we have a deep, meaningful, powerful conversation. If it ends up that we don't work together, that's fine. I love to coach people and help people. So that's one way. The second way is I have a community on Facebook of business owners and leaders, with the point of the community being to help create that know, like, and trust, where people know, like, and trust each other. They network together. It's a community that is engaging. In other words, people are actually commenting and posting and liking and interacting. It's not post your business and then walk away and hope somebody clicks on it. We don't do that there. It's not okay. We actually communicate. We meet every week on Thursdays and interact together, so we can learn from each other and build that know, like, and trust triangle. The group is called the Blue Shirt Business Community. You can find it on Facebook. Just type that in. I need to give you a different URL because that's not the URL, but Blue Shirt Business Community is what you search for. And there's a picture of me on the cover of it, so you'll know you found the right one. But I love that community. I started it in January, and we're already over 130 people. And I'm doing it very intentionally, meeting every single person that I invite. It's not just this random. It's not random. I'm inviting people personally to join, which I'm inviting you personally, Neil, to join the community.
Thank you.
So
thank you. I appreciate that, and I love that approach to it. I'm just winding down here. I think we've come to a beautiful close here. Is there anything that you think that we should point out, that anything you want to say before we close out here today?
Often I say at this point to ask that question, ask people questions, ask yourself open-ended questions. And I've said that already, but I would reiterate that and also reiterate that we need to be quiet and still. And that requires removing screens from our lives, getting the screens away from our faces. I've found that when I remove the screen, my thinking is really clear. It's beautiful thinking. And the listeners, it'll be the same thing for them. Yeah. Remove the screens, remove the distractions, and you might be surprised at the impact that it has, especially if you do it in the middle of the day. As you're working, remove the screens, take a moment. So that's would be my wrap up.
Yeah, I love it, because I know that especially when my life is filled with things, and it feels overwhelming, I find that that's the best time to remove the screens. And I'll go off of TikTok and Instagram and all of that stuff. You might not see me for a couple of weeks, and I will, just to have those resources for creativity in what I'm doing. If I can go back to it later on, okay, great, I'll go back to it later on. But I'm always trying to stay focused on whatever that is, that next item in it, and hold the space for creativity, because I found that if you don't have that time to think, you don't have the time to be creative. And if you don't have the time to be creative, that's where all the beautiful stuff tends to come from, is in that space. So, wow. Kyle, I really appreciate you coming on today. I really appreciate you answering a lot of these questions and giving that to us. And I really appreciate you giving us your time today.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, for sure.
All right, guys. This is another episode of the Leadership to Wealth podcast. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.